What does it mean to be a great leader, and how can we exemplify the best qualities of leadership with the people in our lives, whether it's our family, our friends, the people that we work with, or our teammates around us in sports or at the gym, anywhere in our lives? How can we be the best possible leaders, and what does that even really mean? Welcome to Thriving Launch with Luis Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business. How would you like to be able to interview world-class experts, sit down and have chats with people like Jack Canfield, Marianne Williamson, Robert Kiyosaki, Tim Ferriss, you name it? Would you love to interview other people that you really admire and consider to be your heroes? Well, we've created a course for you that teaches you how to podcast, how to set it all up, and how to get going so that you can really have a successful show and you can do it properly. Over at thrivinglaunch.com, we have a podcasting course, and it's there for you, waiting for you to snatch it up. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com and let me teach you how to podcast the right way. Well, in order for us to have that discussion, we've brought on leadership expert and author Brad Lomenick. He's written the book, Be Humble, Stay Hungry, and Always Hustle. It's a fantastic book that really looks at what is the catalyst for leadership and how do we be great leaders. So without further ado, let's bring on Brad.
It is so great to have you on Thriving Launch, Brad. Are you ready to launch?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. Well, one thing that I know you are a genius at is leadership and teaching other people how to be leaders, how to grow teams and maintain teams. And I'd love to hear just your perspective on leadership. What makes a leader and why is it important?
Well, the first thing is I'm definitely not a genius. I think one of the first things about leaders that I admire and great leaders are, that they realize they're on the journey, and leadership is one of those things you never arrive at, even though you might have a title or a position, or you might have a seat at the table that says you're in charge. But I would argue and submit that great leadership is really it's a process. It's not a journey. So you got to be willing to go on that journey and be a lifetime learner. To give you a real simple definition, I have to sort of revert back to my mentor, one of my mentors, a guy named John Maxwell, who many of your listeners would probably know of. I mean, he's written lots and lots of leadership books. And
John Maxwell is fantastic. I saw him speak at a 2-day event, and he is incredible. A guy is filled with so much wisdom, presents and leads in a very dynamic, powerful, and yet this very humble and fully human being at the same time. Yeah.
And so John really, I would say helped me define my own leadership. And I worked for John for many years, and I was doing conferences for him, and we started something called Catalyst, which, was a big part of my history and my story for gathering young leaders. But Maxwell says this, he says leadership is influence. And, you can think about title, you can think about power, you can think about position, you can think about hierarchy, you can think about I'm in charge, I'm your boss. And all those potentially are true about leadership, but I would say that the true definition is just that, it's influence. So if you have influence, then you're a leader. And that brings all of us into the equation. It allows for mothers to say they're a leader because they're influencing their children. It allows neighbors to say they're a leader. It allows obviously people who are running an organization. It allows people on a team. It allows students in a school. It allows teachers, fill in the blank. And so,
what you're saying is really powerful to me, because I think about children and how a lot of times as we're growing up and we're young and we're kids, we feel like we are not leaders or we're not influential. And yet now that, I'm an adult, when I'm around kids, I'm influenced by them and I'm impacted by them, and I want to be. I want to learn from them. I want to see how they think, how they feel. And I remember one time this kid saying to me, I wanted to give this talk and I was nervous about it and everything. And she said, one of the things it says in a really great text is it doesn't matter how old you are, you have the ability to impact and influence people. And it's just what you're saying is so true, and it's awesome that you're saying it.
Well, and this is never before have we lived in a time where this has been more true, because technology and all the things that we now are used to, social media, the ability for us to garner a platform or to create people who listen to us or watch us or paying attention to us has never actually been easier. So all the sort of traditional lines that you would have said leaders are on one side and everybody else is on the other, all those lines are gone now, because I can start a company at 19 or 20, or I can start a blog, and all of a sudden 6 months later 10,000 people are reading my stuff online, and I'm a leader. You might not think you are at that point, but you truly are influencing people. And you don't have a bunch of people working for you. You're not a boss necessarily, but this is just a new age of what it means to have impact and influence. So that's how I would describe it.
One thing that was something a mentor said to me that I really took to heart was that a leader builds people up. And they're not at the top of the pyramid, but they go to the level where the people are and they build them up higher. And that really stuck with me when I started creating teams, when I got my first staff and all of that.
Yeah, and I would say too, Kamala, that the leader today is not just in charge, but they're out in front. And the idea of a leader who's willing to risk, who's willing to stand up when others are sitting down, when they're willing to step out when others are stepping back. And that idea that you're a leader today because not just because you're in charge, because that you don't have to be in charge anymore to be a leader, but you do have to be out in front to be a leader. You have to be willing to step in when you're called on. And this is another thing about leadership today is the great leaders are the ones who are in the trenches with their team. The old days of I'm the CEO and I'm the president and I sit in my corner office and drink a spritzer and put my feet up on the desk and bark out orders to all the minions. Those days are over. I mean, that may be true still in some industries, but great leaders today are the ones down in the trench with their team. They're getting their fingers dirty. They're in the ditch, digging in the dirt. And it doesn't mean you do that all the time, but you have to be willing to stand beside your team as well as stand in front of your team and get in the trench with your team if you're going to have influence today.
That really reminds me a lot, looping back around to John Maxwell again, in a series and a training that I took of his all about creating great leaders. And one of the things that he said is that if you want to be a leader and be someone that creates influence, you first have to be someone who's achieved what other people will want to achieve. You have to be somebody who's done it or is doing it and is really actively pursuing success in an area. And the more that you have that particular success and the more you're doing it, the more that other people will join you on your mission and you'll create this movement. But it takes you being involved in it first. And what I like about that and what I like about what you're saying is, one, everybody at some point is a leader, right? So all of you listening, all you thriving launchers listening, you right now are a leader. When you show up to work, when you say hello to your partner, or you say bye to your best friend, or whatever it might be, or you're interacting with a group of people, anytime you're with people, you are in a leader role. And what I like what you've done is you strip this idea that a leader is someone that's elevated and put up there by the people and is given a name tag that says manager or CEO. They're given a corner office, and not until that point you're a leader. You've stripped that away and you said you're a leader at every moment in your life, and you have the possibility of creating influence.
Yeah, well, and here's the other reality, Luis, is that leaders, the first person you have to lead is yourself. If you're going to be a great leader, you have to lead yourself well. And sometimes we forget about, that part of leadership, but that's the most important. Because if you can't lead yourself, then you can't lead others. And so much of leadership is actually, you be great. Like becoming a great leader is about you actually achieving greatness. And just like you're saying, like if you're not living it out, then you can't expect the people that are supposed to be watching you and being led by you to live it out.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about something that we could embody or practice, all of us here at Thriving Launch, what we can do to be a better leader.
So I would say the essence is this. It's really simple. The idea of be humble, stay hungry, always hustle. H3 leadership. Live those out. And I've said that to many young leaders over the years when they said, boil it down, Brad. I want the simplicity. I want the elementary version. I want the phrase I can remember. And that was the answer I would give. Be humble, stay hungry, always hustle. And there's obviously lots of different habits that have to be underneath each of those big buckets and those categories of leadership. But I love that premise that a leader who is humble and is hungry and hustles is a leader who's gonna make a difference. And here's the key. I know you got to be balanced in these. You got to do all three of them. You can't have a cumulative scorecard of leadership with an A if you get an F in one of those. And I know lots of leaders who are incredibly humble that don't do anything. I mean, they don't have any hustle to them. And so they have a posture of humility, but they're not accomplishing anything. And then just the opposite is true. I know a lot of leaders who hustle like crazy and it's all about them and they're trying to get theirs and they're building their kingdom and they're building their empire, and the people who work for them despise them and they don't like being around them. So we have to live these in balance. It has to be a three-legged stool that are equally standing up straight, so you can actually stand on that stool and be a leader who is all three.
One of the things that comes up for me as I hear you talk about these is they all feel pretty self-explanatory. I can get what being hungry is. I can get what having hustle is. I can get what being humble is. But what I start to think about is that hunger can be hard to keep when you have goals and you achieve them. And have you found any kind of hacks or any ways to help people stay hungry? Because on our path, we have goals and we achieve them or we don't. And then it's just hard to stay hungry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's such a true statement, Luis. Like, the John Maxwell is one of the examples that I use a lot of a leader who's hungry. And here's a guy who has accomplished it all, in the sense that he sits at the top of the mountain, of the leadership mountain. If there's a leadership mountain, he's sitting up on top of it taking pictures.
Yeah, he is the leadership guy. He is that guy. Yeah.
But I watched John, because I worked with him for many years. I watched him at conferences. After he would speak, he would go sit in the front row, and he would get his yellow pad out, and he still uses a yellow pad to this day. I mean, I don't think he has a cell phone, but he doesn't really use it that much. He has a yellow pad, and he has one of those 4 colored pens. You know what I'm talking about? Like that You can actually choose between, black or red or green or blue. And
right.
He get his pen out and he's taking notes. And just that posture, like the picture for me of a leader who's hungry is the leader who's arrived, who is number one. They can coast, but they still are sitting in the front row with that yellow pad out. And they've got the 4-colored pen, and they're leaning forward in their chair taking notes. That's the image for me that I want to be as a leader. And this is true at every level and every stage of your journey, is as soon as you feel like you're now the man or the woman, or you're now the captain of your industry, or you're now, you've figured out something, then take the posture of front row, yellow pad, 4-colored pen, and you're taking notes. And that's what a hungry leader is. It's somebody who says, I never arrive. I constantly want to be better. Here, let me give you one more, because this is one I've found to be true, especially for young leaders and for those of us who are trying to maybe, I would say, elevate our status or get better or, sort of move up in the ladder of influence, is be curious. Curiosity is one of the great ways for you to gain credibility really quickly. And ask great questions. The people who I'm always admiring as leaders are the ones who are the most curious. They're inquisitive. They constantly are peppering me with questions, even though they're the ones in the room who should be given all the answers. And I would just say, like, when you walk into a room and you feel like your job is to be the expert, turn the tables and just be the best question asker that you can possibly be. And it will elevate you, I promise you. People will walk away from conversations with you and they'll say, that person is really smart. And you just want to look at them and go, I didn't say anything. I just ask you really good questions.
This is just making me think about curiosity and how important it is for intimacy and relationships as well, and not just business. And that's something that we've explored a lot here on Thriving Launch, is how curiosity can bring us closer to other people, to bring us closer and more present to what's happening in life in each moment. Because if we're curious, then we're always seeking. And that's one thing, Luis, I'm sure you've experienced this too, about podcasting. We get to ask questions all day to incredible people, and that curiosity has really taken us to a whole different level in our business because we're asking those questions. Even if we think we know about a subject, we still ask.
No, definitely. And Brad, for me, you're like basically quoting one of my favorite books. It's one of the most well-read books in the world of business and influence. And it's that book by Dale Carnegie, How to Influence and Win People Over. I forget the exact, the title's long.
Win friends and influence people.
Yeah, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And every great business person or successful leader that I've come across has told me they've read that book.
Yeah, it's a classic. I mean, it's on the shelves of all great leaders. And Brian Grazer, who is a well-known producer in Hollywood, he just recently came out with a book. I think it's called Curious Mind or Curious Minds. And I listened to an interview that I believe Lewis Howes or Tim Ferriss, somebody did with Brian Grazer. And he was talking about how he's gotten ahead in Hollywood because he's lived at this premise of curiosity. And he said, here's the reason this works. It's not just, it does help with life and I learn things, but it actually has helped me in business because when I'm going after an actor like Denzel Washington, that's the example he used in this interview. He said, if I'm really interested in Denzel Washington's world and I'm curious about his family, I'm giving honor to him by asking him really good questions. I want to know what makes him tick. You don't think he's going to choose to work on my project compared to somebody else? And it was such a light bulb for me of, wow, that's true. Like, it's what you said, Kamala, like you're actually creating intimacy and connection with people by honoring them in a conversation and in a relationship, because you're elevating them to the place where they have the power and they're being given the honor in that relationship because you're seeking to learn more about them. And it's just such a great posture to have as a leader and also as a boss. I mean, anybody who's leading people, the best way for you to honor your people is actually to be curious about what's going on in their world.
And to add power to what you're saying too, in my former life, in a sense, my background is actually in marriage education, and that's what I did for 3 years. I worked with the nation's largest research project. And after seeing over 300 married couples with children, one of the things that I realized is that the most happy and successful couples, and when I say successful couple, I really mean that they're in joy, they've been together for a long time, they have a beautiful relationship, they're healthy. And I noticed that hands down, every single one of them said, every day I'm learning something new about my partner. Every day there's something to be amazed by with my partner. And so this doesn't just work in the field of, when we say leadership, I think of business or I think of sports, but leadership is also in your relationship, a connection that you have with anyone. And in a relationship like a marriage or you're dating somebody, being curious is one of the keys to success.
Yeah, no question. And you can always tell the difference between somebody who's truly curious because they have good intentions, or even the way people ask questions, compared to somebody who is asking you a question in order to set up their answer. And those are the people that we tend to sort of move away from at dinner parties. Those are the people that we don't necessarily like to be around them much, because you can tell pretty quickly that the honor that they're trying to give is back to themselves. And the people who ask great questions are the ones who are truly interested in the answer. They're not just setting up the opportunity for them to be the hero or for them to be the expert in the conversation. So be careful that you're taking an approach that is one of full disclosure of my intentions, in the sense that I want to learn. Like, I want to honor you. I want to learn. It will help me, but I'm not here to ultimately, at the end of the day, make it about myself.
It's been so great having you on Thriving Launch, Brad. Thank you so much for coming on. And Thriving Launchers, I hope you can take these principles and leadership and start to incorporate them into your daily lives.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for having me.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.